I want to start by taking us back to an era that a lot of y'all might be too young to remember. This was a time that was very special to me during my college years, my senior year of college, way back in 2018. Feels like yesterday. But seriously, in the month or so leading up to my graduation at NYU, I felt amazing. I was grateful, I was excited, and I was relieved. But there was this specific three-word phrase that would come up during conversations with my friends and family members that would make all those positive feelings go away immediately. That three-word phrase was, "So what's next?" As soon as I heard this phrase, I went into panic because I didn't know what was next. I wasn't going to grad school immediately. I didn't have a job lined up. I just didn't know exactly what my next steps were. So I would squirm my way through those conversations and then run home, hop online, and apply to 3 or 4 more jobs, hoping that something would change before somebody else asked me that question. The worst part about it is that I knew in my heart that taking energy away from this time of happiness and celebration was not helping at all, but I really felt consumed by it. It felt like for some reason my current achievement was not valid unless I had another one on deck. And this next part of the story that I'm going to tell you all, I haven't told any friends, any family members, no one. This is a world premiere, so here we go. I had a close friend who I went to school with, but we also applied to the exact same job. So in the weeks leading up to graduation, we would check in with each other every single day, multiple times a day. Did you hear anything from them? Nope. You? Nope. Okay, good. At least they haven't turned us down yet. And it would go on like that. So finally, the day of our graduation arrives, and we still have not heard from this potential employer. My school graduation happened at Radio City Music Hall on the day before the big university graduation at Yankee Stadium. And I had been given a few awards and honors by the university, so I was seated on stage during the ceremony. My good friend Katrina was sitting directly in the front row, right in my line of sight, and there were thousands of students and family members that filled the theater around us. So the ceremony is going on, everything is good, and I feel my phone vibrate in my pocket. I cannot make this up. It is a text from Katrina. She says, "I just heard back from the job. They told me I didn't get the position." So let's take a moment to pause right here. I am on stage at my college graduation. This is a moment that these students have worked their entire lives to get to. Family has literally traveled from all across the world to be here for this special moment, and I have taken a second to check my text. So I have the opportunity to put my phone back in my pocket, enjoy this amazing event, and get to my emails later, or I can take it up a notch and see if this potential employer has reached out to me. So, which option do you all think I chose? Yes, I took it all the way there. I opened up my email app, I refreshed, and of course, at the top of my screen was a message from this employer. "Good morning, Christopher. We are saddened to tell you that you were not selected for the position." So as engaging as that story might have been, just imagine for a second the amount of anxiety that I must have been feeling that would make me want to check the status of a job application on stage during my college graduation. But when I talked to my peers, I realized that I was not alone in this. If you go on Twitter, not right now, but if you go on Twitter and type in the phrase, "doing after graduation," you will see thousands of tweets from students all across the world expressing this exact same panicked feeling. So when I reflected on what it could be that made us feel this so heavily, I realized that for a new graduate, this is the first time in our life that we have not had a guided path to achievement set up for us. From birth, we are taught to mold our lives around achievement. Our first steps, achieve and then celebrate. Our first words, achieve and then celebrate. Kindergarten graduation, middle school honor roll, team sports, awards, honor societies, all the way up to college graduation. In this society, there's always been an emphasis on reaching some sort of measurable goal, but even more, there's been the comfort of knowing that the steps to your next achievement are outlined for you. The steps to your next achievement are outlined for you. But when I thought about the way that myself and my peers were reacting to this new challenge, I realized that we are not in a society that just values achievement. We are in a society that is addicted to it, obsessed with it, and that's a huge problem. You see, this obsession can lead us to very harmful places, but of course it all starts with the creation of the obsession itself, and what I like to call the what's next paradox. Now, inside of the what's next paradox, we are convinced that each achievement is only validated by how much better it is than our previous achievements. And what's worse is that as soon as you reach this achievement, no matter how great it is, it almost immediately starts to lose value. There was an element of this in my own personal graduation story, but if you pay attention, it repeats itself in different areas. For example, an athlete trains their entire life to get in prime physical shape, competes day in, day out, makes it to the professional level, and finally can win a championship. And before they take the jersey off of their back, a reporter comes up to ask them, what's next? Or a music artist, they work their entire life putting in time, money, effort, and pushing their music to the masses. And as soon as they win their first award, which is supposed to symbolize some sort of moment of relief, an interviewer pushes through the crowd to ask, what's happening in the future? A life based on continuous achievement is a life based on continuous comparison, whether that be between the past and present, the present and the future, or between your achievements and those of someone else. But when I noticed the way that people were talking about this whole concept of achievement, I realized that achievement is something that's not mentioned explicitly by people. They don't say that they're curious about what's next. They don't say that they're excited for the next chance to achieve. They say that they are anxious, they feel stressed, and honestly, they feel fearful because they don't know what direction they're going to go in. And that might be getting into detail, but to me, it spoke volumes because it seemed like fear of failure was equally as compelling as excitement about achievement. Or in more simple terms, the other side of being obsessed with achievement is being terrified of failure. And that is something that plagues a group much larger than just recent graduates. In fact, 1 in 3 people in our society have admitted to having an extreme fear of failure. So that means that if you don't have this extreme fear, somebody sitting beside you tonight does. Don't make it awkward. So I read in an article that this extreme fear of failure can actually become so debilitating that it stops people from even pursuing any goal that is not guaranteed to be successful. Again, we see this harmful interaction between fear of failure and obsession with achievement. But that concept of compromising in order to avoid failure reminded me of a lesson learned at a previous job. So let's rewind all the way back to when I was 18 years old, first year college student, and needless to say, I was broke. So I went and found myself a job as an SAT tutor in Brooklyn. Now, that meant that every day after my morning classes, I would hop on the C train at West 4th Street and take that all the way to Crown Heights, where I would teach these students strategies to improve their test scores. Now, I took a different test in high school. It was called the ACT, but I did well, so I thought I would be able to hop right in. No, the SAT had a completely different set of rules, which required me to teach a completely different set of strategies. Now, one of the most controversial rules at this time was called the guessing penalty. The guessing penalty says that if a student is taking a test and they come across a question they don't know the answer to, and they decide to fill in a random bubble, they will be penalized 1/4 of a point if they get that question wrong. Now, of course, a Scantron machine can't tell how confident a student was when filling out a bubble, so essentially what the SAT was doing was penalizing students for getting answers wrong altogether. Now, as you can imagine, this started to stop students from filling in some questions completely. They probably figured that getting no points on a question was better than getting points taken away. But it's important to realize that students were not leaving questions blank just because they were afraid of the idea of getting it wrong. Because actually, the guessing penalty was removed a few years later, and immediately the official strategy became to make sure that no bubbles on your test are left blank, no matter how sure or unsure you are of the answer. Students were only leaving questions blank because they knew that if they got it wrong, the value of their score would be reduced. Now, similarly, I think in our current situation, it's not failure by itself that's making us so afraid. And for that matter, it's not achievement that makes us so excited. But the truth, whether we decide to say it out loud or not, is that we are afraid that if we do fail, our own personal values will be reduced. And we hope that if we are able to achieve, our own personal worth will increase. That's what this society has taught us. Now, I will admit, though, that in recent years, I've seen a lot of articles and books and even TED Talks that have been urging people not to look at failure as something that's punishable. Instead, we should see it as being validated when looked at as part of a process. The issue with this philosophy is that if you follow it all the way through, the true sentiment is that Failure is validated when looked at as part of a process that must ultimately lead to achievement. We're still trapped. But what if I told you all that these constructs that seem to have such a heavy grip on our lives are not the best ways to measure personal value? They're really just the most convenient. And what's worse than the personal harm that they cause us is that they make us oblivious to the impact that we have on other people. The secret power to a life lived outside of these boxes was shown to me by people who never had the luxury of prioritizing them. My great-great-grandfather, Jesse Wilson. Now, of course, I never met him, but when my grandmother, who's in attendance, found out that I would be giving a TED Talk at the historic cultural hub of the Lincoln Theater in my hometown of Columbus, Ohio, she brought his name up. She told me about someone who was born in 1905. And in his younger years, he played football at West High School right here in Columbus, and he unloaded blocks of ice from the back of trucks at the old Ice House, which some of you all might now know as the Spaghetti Warehouse restaurant. And just like all of us, he had a list of achievements that he wanted to reach in his life. And for him, one of those main achievements was to become a physician. And he was well on his way. He had plans of going to medical school at Ohio University, but then family circumstances caused him to have to give up his opportunities to achieve in order to find opportunities to provide. So he started to work a number of jobs. He started out as a radio repairman, and then he moved on to fixing televisions. And he actually worked for a number of years here in this very theater, back in that film room, putting movies on the reel so that attendees, who often included my grandma, who was probably only in middle school at that time, could come enjoy movies on the big screen. In his later years, he worked as a custodian at a church where his funeral would eventually be held. And my grandmother told me that during his funeral service, the church members and his previous co-workers said that he was the smartest man that many of them had ever met. And when I asked her how she personally remembered him, she admitted to me that she couldn't really remember his personal achievements or failures, but that he was a loyal man, that he was dependable, that he was kind, gentle, and sometimes a little bit grouchy. But I admitted to her that I had been wondering how somebody who I've never met and honestly knew so little about could feel so present in my life today. And her and I were on the phone, so she took a pause and said to me, my great-great-grandfather, who on paper was, an ice delivery man, a radio repairman, and a film room worker, was the person who taught her and everyone else around him what it meant to truly value family, and that the lessons that he taught were the ones that have been passed down through generations, all the way to me, now standing on a stage in the same theater that he worked at almost a century ago. And hearing this story reminded me that I should maybe focus less on the title that somebody holds in a professional, academic, or even social space, and to focus more on the words that other people use to describe them. It taught me that I should focus less on the size of impact that somebody has had, but to focus more on the type of impact that somebody has had. You see, achievements and failures are not our enemies. They help us to learn important lessons, they help us to gauge progress, and they help us step up to new challenges, but they are also very subjective, and they're volatile. The worst thing about achievement and failure is that they are often manipulated to put certain people in positions that they do not deserve to fill, while keeping others out of spaces that they have earned the right to occupy, oftentimes spaces that they or we have built with our own hands. But that's the topic for another TED Talk. The bad news that I have for you all at the end of today is that I was not able to come up with a real alternative for measuring personal value. That's because your personal value is intrinsic. You can't earn it. You cannot calculate it. You are valuable because you exist. We are valuable because we exist. And since we're in a space that seems to value the power of a spoken word, I would like everyone to please repeat after me as if you mean it. I am valuable because I exist. We are valuable because we exist.
We are valuable because we exist.
Yeah. You see, in this life, we simply have the opportunity to acknowledge this value, find the power that lies within it, and then get to work. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.